Okay, I did my presentation on the genocide in Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge was a radical communist group led by Pol Pot, and they took control of Cambodia in 1975. Their goal was to create a rural, classless communist society. But to do that, they decided to eliminate anyone they saw as a threat to that vision. Civil war had already been going on in Cambodia since 1970, and between 1970 and 1973, during the Vietnam War, the United States bombed a lot of the countryside of Cambodia and manipulated Cambodia politics in order to support the rise of pro-West Lone Nol as the leader of Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge then used the United States actions to recruit followers and as an excuse for the brutal policies they exercised when in power. The Khmer Rouge's policies were formed by its belief that Cambodia had been tainted by exposure to outside ideas, especially by the capitalist West. Their main targets were ethnic and religious minorities like the Sham Muslims, ethnic Vietnamese, Chinese Cambodians, as well as Christians and Buddhists. They also went after city dwellers and basically anyone they considered an intellectual or class enemy, including teachers and clergy. The Khmer Rouge created this really strict division between what they called the pure Khmer people and the outsiders. It wasn't just physical differences, it was based on religion, language, and culture. They said the outsiders were dangerous and used that to justify violence. They banned minority languages and religious practices, trying to erase those cultural identities altogether and enforced cultural homogeneity. Homogeny. They created collective living arrangements where everyone was forced to live and work on collective farms. And then they enacted re-education programs to encourage that commune lifestyle. It was all about erasing identity and enforcing one single Khmer culture. The Khmer Rouge believed that minorities and educated people stood in the way of their dream for an ethnically pure, farming-based communist nation. They viewed them as corrupting influences, and that paranoia, mixed with a desire for absolute control, helped justify mass murder in their eyes. The genocide lasted from 1975 to 1979, and in just those 4 years, roughly 2 million people, about a quarter of Cambodia's entire population, were killed. People died from executions, starvation, forced labor, torture, and a lack of medical care. Other crimes included rape, destruction of cultural heritage, forced displacement, and attacks on children and families. So when I looked up the difference between genocide and ethnic cleansing, I thought that of course what happened in Cambodia would be called a genocide. Because what happened in Cambodia wasn't just about pushing people out of their homes, it was about erasing them completely. And genocide means trying to destroy a group, their culture, everything. Ethnic cleansing seems to be more about forcing people to leave, but the Khmer Rouge went way beyond that. They wanted to wipe out entire communities and anyone who didn't fit their idea of a pure society. However, many genocide scholars believe the events in Cambodia don't qualify as genocide under the United Nations Convention because intent to destroy one specific ethnic or religious group cannot be proven. It occurred across all of society instead of targeting just one specific group. We can also see patterns of social conflict here that we've learned about in class. There was expulsion, like the forced displacement of minorities. Segregation, like when the city populations were emptied and forced to work in the countryside. Acculturation, since the Khmer Rouge banned minority cultures and forced everyone to adopt Khmer customs. And marginalization, as intellectuals and religious leaders were targeted as threats. Because of all this, hundreds of thousands of Cambodians fled their homes. Many ended up in refugee camps along the Thai border. Over time, more than 260,000 refugees were resettled in countries like the US, France, Australia, and Canada, and later about 360,000 Cambodians were able to return home with help from the United Nations. Humanitarian organizations like the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and the United Nations Transitional Authority in Cambodia helped provide aid, rebuild infrastructure, and organize post-conflict elections. Sadly, the rest of the world was slow to respond at first, but eventually many non-government organizations and Western countries did help out with recovery and resettlement. What really stood out to me while researching this topic is how social construct of ethnicity and class can be manipulated to justify terrible violence. The Cambodian genocide is a heartbreaking example of how powerful and dangerous those ideas can be when tied to fear and control. Even today, the same social patterns like discrimination, forced assimilation, or the marginalization of certain groups still show up in different forms, even right here in our own country. So, remembering Cambodia isn't just about learning history, it's about recognizing those warning signs in our own world now.